So the film I decided to do was The Pianist, which was directed by Roman Polanski and released in 2002. It is based upon an autobiography written by Władysław Spielman and his survival of the Holocaust in Warsaw, Poland from around 1935 to the end of World War II in 1945. So the movie describes um, Władysław Spielman, a very, very famous pianist in Poland. He played on a um, Polish radio show, which contributed to his fame, and a lot of people listened in. This was disrupted by the entering of German troops into Poland, where he and his family suffered the most since they were Jewish, and how in his survival during the Holocaust. Spielman and his family suffered a lot of discrimination, and it just shows their journey from their home in Warsaw, Poland, to their very, very compact space in the Warsaw Ghetto. Ultimately, around the middle of the movie, Spielman is separated by his family during the process of the well able-bodied Jews sent off to work, and like the lesser um, able worked Jews sent off to death camps, and ultimately meeting there in a very, very um, terrifying way. There, Spielman goes through his journey in the war-torn Warsaw, where he jumps from abandoned building. No, he first works as a laborer, but then after that he ultimately escapes the ghetto, where he lives with some well-known friends before he entered the ghetto. And after that, he jumps from abandoned building to abandoned building, where ultimately he is um, in the attic of a blown up building, where this Nazi commander helps him and brings him food, where Spielman survives until the end of the war, where he is actually found by Russian troop members and helped. After this, he he publishes his story in an autobiography called Śmierć Miasta, or The Death of a City, in 1946. This didn't really get as much popularity as he hoped, so then around 40 years later, his son actually and his wife tell him to republish it again in 1998, and he does, and he renames it, named under the name of The Pianist, where it got its fame and it got turned into a movie by the director Roman Polanski. So the historical accuracy of this film is very, very spot on, since the movie is based on the autobiography by Mr. Spielman. So the Nazis entered Poland on August 31st, 1939, in an event called Blitzkrieg, where they go around. Blitzkrieg, I think it's named after like broken glass or something like that, where Nazi soldiers just came around and broke in Nazi shops and Nazi windows. I mean, not Nazi Jewish shops and Jewish windows, and disrupted their lives and completely changed their lives forever. So, um, before the imprisonment of his family, a lot of laws were passed before this. The first law was passed of the Star of David on November 23rd, 1939, where all Jewish people, I think above the age of 10 years old, had to wear a blue Star of David on their pass to distinguish who was Jewish and who was not, which ultimately led to a lot of abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, discrimination. And this is shown in the movie um, when Mr. Spielman's father, Samuel, is walking around town, and he went to go buy some groceries for his family, like some loaves of bread, some vegetables, anything they could to survive. And a German officer sees his armband and calls him over. And the German officer asks him, "Why didn't you bow?" And Samuel's like, "Excuse me?" And the officer doesn't respond to him and just physically um, hits him on the face, and the Samuel is completely like confused by this, and just represents the abuse Nazis people did to the Jewish people of that community. And then a little time later, the handling of money was also commenced during the Nazi rule in Poland. Around November, they started controlling how much money Jewish people could the Jewish people could save up or have, which was around 250 zlotys a week, which is barely nothing they could save, because some Jewish families had more money than that, and only giving them this amount each time a week really didn't give them enough time to save up as much as they could. Spielman, the pianist, um, actually trying to come up with an idea how to save the money. So he comes up with an idea to actually stuff the money into his father's violin. His father was a violin player, and that was accurately represented in the movie. So then, on October 14th, 1940, that's when the commencement of the Warsaw Ghetto was introduced, and 140,000 Jewish people were made to evacuate the homes and live in this ghetto, which was only 3 square miles and fitting 140,000 Jews. That's just the beginning of it. That was at least 7.5 people per room. It grew from 140 to 300,000, and to the most I actually had is 500,000 Jews living in this very very compacted place. After that, the the deportation of Jews began, where they just started deporting the able-bodied Jews from the non-able-bodied Jews to concentration camps, death camps, where they ultimately faced their end, and they were rounded up by SS guards. During the deportation, 10,000 Jews were murdered before even arriving to the death camp, probably more than that. In the movie, this is represented by Spielman and his family called out, and they stay at this very very this little courtyard square where they just load up the Jews into a train, take them off, and this is where Spielman and his family had their like last dinner, sort of say. His dad buys a piece of caramel for 20 zlotys, which is a lot of money for just like, it was a tiny piece of caramel, where he split it into 6 pieces, one for each of the family members, which were 2 sisters and a brother and the mom and dad, and that was ultimately the last supper they had, where then he was then separated from his family, and he never saw his family again when they were shipped off to the concentration camps. He was actually helped by one of their, because one of their a family friend was a Jewish officer, and the Jewish officers controlled the ghetto they lived in, make sure nobody snuck in, nobody snuck out, nobody snuck something in or smuggled anything in. But he ultimately helped Spielman not get shipped off to the concentration camps. And this is where the majority of the story commences, and it shows Spielman's survival. He turns to construction work after he is separated from his family, and he works there for about a year until around 1943, where he escapes the ghetto and he is rummaging around the um, war-torn Warsaw, and he jumps from house to house to non-Jew family friends to non-Jew family friends, and they give him apartments and they give him like anything where they can live in. He stays at a apartment that is in front of the Warsaw Ghetto, and this is where in the movie they actually depict the the battle between the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto against the Nazis, which is known as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which began around like the autumn 1942 to January 18th, 1943. Here he saw the opposition of the Jews against the Nazis, and the Nazis had no idea the Jews even had it in them, being there for almost two and a half years. So there he witnessed the battle they had. There the ghetto had around 4 months of no deportation of Jews until ultimately the Nazis just came in and started killing everybody on sight. But then the Jews fought back with automatic rifles and cocktail bombs, which was like alcohol with a piece of cloth on fire, and threw them at the Nazis. And the Nazis were in no shape to completely face a rebellion from them. But ultimately, the Jews lost, which caused around a 56,000 Jews killed in the complex. But in the movie, it explains that they did not die in vain and they actually died with a cause. Spielman leaves that apartment complex because all the apartment complexes surrounding the Jewish the Warsaw Ghetto are blown up, and he has to go find somewhere else. So at the end, he ends up staying at a abandoned home where he stays in the attic, and where he was discovered by Wehrmacht, a Wehrmacht captain, like a captain of the Nazis. His name was Wilhelm Hosenfeld, and he was actually a real person. He provided Spielman with food and water. And the scene I incorporated in my blog was when he actually met the captain and played. The captain asked, like, "Who are you? Like, are you a Jew?" And Spielman's like, "Yeah, I'm a Jew." And he's like, "What do you do?" He's like, "I play the piano." So that scene, Spielman plays the piano, and the it looks like the Nazi decides like not to kill him, actually keep him, and gives him food, which ultimately helps Spielman survive until the end of the World War II, where um, the Nazis are defeated, the Russians come in, and Spielman is ultimately discovered by the Russians as he survives. He carried on with his life in Warsaw, became a very, very famous pianist, published some CDs. He died on June 6, 2000 at the age of 88, and it seemed he had a very, very um, happy and fulfilling life, even though he witnessed hell during the Holocaust, but ultimately survived. So my personal review of this movie and what I thought about this movie is that I thought it was absolutely amazing. I feel like nowadays movies are very, very glamorized, and everything always ends up well and happy, and there's always a happy ending. But this movie seemed very, very raw, uncut, not glamorized at all. It showed the actual the terrors the Jews faced, the absolute horror of the Holocaust, and it seemed like throughout the years we kind of seemed a little desensitized of what actually happened. But this movie really, to me personally, put me back into what the Holocaust actually was, what actually happened, and how they had no mercy for anybody that was there. And I thought the film did a very, very, very good job of that. It opened my eyes to how we should never do this again, and just the true horror of it. A lot of critics said it was a very human approach, and it just showed how raw it was and uncut meant, just to show the true terror of this movie. The movie was very, very touching. It made me very emotional. I cried around 3 times during it, but overall, I loved it. I thought it was a very, very good movie. Top 5. Thank you.